I want to welcome you guys to episode 2 of Random Farms. I like creating these ideas and I like doing random experiments with this. And my first thought was where to start. And where to start but the basics with a cobble farm. I had a lot of ideas when I started this, and I wanted to make sure I could figure out how to work with everything I had here. I had a couple of ideas to start with the way I wanted to generate cobble and the way I wanted to destroy it. And this is a two-way TNT duper. I can use this to fire TNT twice and drop it within the same column. The only problem was this was pretty hard to get the right timing between pushing and pulling and getting it to drop with the mechanics I had at play. So this didn't end up turning out, and this was actually a really bad design for a TNT duper. Down below, I decided that I wanted to start with kind of a fun way to have cobble generate. The idea was to use a dispenser and have it basically flow right next to lava in a downwards pattern. But I didn't really like the way that worked, and it ended up being a little bit more complicated than I would have liked, so I scrapped this design. This design never even made it into a blast chamber because it just did not work for what I wanted. This design does work, and this is 81,000 cobble an hour, but I want to say that most of this is lost. I didn't really even set up collection for this because it busted in many other ways that I wasn't expecting, so I didn't really care to test this. I did test it through teleporting the items over here to count them, so at full maximum speed, 81,000 is what it can make, but I believe a lot of that is going to be lost with the way this works. There's a lot of cool mechanics with this idea, and I traded the dispenser for a trapdoor. With this design, if I turn this on real quick, it actually pushes the cobble first and unlocks the trapdoor for the perfect moment to where when it generates cobble, it generates it at the lowest level right before it gets pushed. Almost perfectly. And I like this a lot. I think that was a really good idea, and it really worked, but I was really sad with the loss of items. That made me sad. I didn't really like the fact that I was losing so many items to this, and it only ended up being 81,000 an hour for this much work. It seemed kind of counterintuitive, as well as the inside of here is pretty neat. There's a lot of cool moving parts, and I'll leave this in the description because I think you guys might like this, and someone might actually want to build this, but there's probably some way to optimize this to make it a lot faster, but I scrapped this design as well, even though it was functional. So my next step was to try to figure out how to get this into a faster paced farm design. I wanted to make something where it was faster, but more convenient. And this worked. This was a tileable idea I had with lava, air, water, and then it would generate the cobblestone here, obviously. But right here, it's just water. And it's flowing water, so I don't really need to have this column of blocks here, but I think it looks a little bit better being a little bit more concealed. And this allowed me to instantly push the cobble out rather than generating it one by one. I would generate the entire column at the same time. And this worked. I liked the way this laid out, and so much more that I really liked it just a lot. But this is truly satisfying. But again, I couldn't figure out how to tile this together, and the idea was to try to keep it with one duper. I didn't really want to bypass that in any way, so one TNT duper is all I wanted. So I had that end up going to this design. This is a slimeless, entityless TNT duper. It's basically just going to get pushed into this observer, which will self-reset. And once it gets pushed back, then it will drop the TNT. And that made it a little tricky to time, but it really made it interesting to play with. So I decided to use it. And thanks to Lolo in the Discord, I actually managed to get this working, figure out how to tinker with this a little bit, as well as even stack it. If you really wanted to, you could actually stack the TNT dupers, which this is just satisfying more than anything. I don't think this is actually functional, but maybe it is if they were a little bit more spaced apart or something. So I'll leave that in the description as well, in case any of you guys want to maybe play with this and use this somewhere else. It probably has good function and good purpose, just not with any of the cobble testing I was doing. But on this design, I wanted to create a unique way to manage this rather than a bunch of redstone dust, and I thought that I could use observers and blocks. So there's gaps of air here to where the observers can't update the pistons, and then there is solid blocks where it can. And this made it a little interesting to play with, as well as pushing it up and then down probably wasn't the best way to go about it. I should have done it the other way around by pushing it down and then pushing it up. But it made the redstone a little weird, and I didn't want two redstone towers here or anything like that. As well as I didn't want a top-down reset line, so it self-resets. But enough talking, I'll show you guys how this works. As you saw right there, the TNT can sometimes kind of get caught up in the cobble. There's a little bit of a problem with this, but it never actually breaks itself. It just needs a couple of extra TNT. Some of the items are lost during that moment. But even then, this still makes 215,000 cobble an hour, even after the loss. It might be a little bit up or down, but it's around 215,000. And I really do like the rates of this farm for the design that it is. I think there could be a better efficient way to do this, and it might even be better if I could get solid walls here rather than doing this, interlacing them, because then you wouldn't have the items landing right there, more likely. But for 215,000 cobble, I think that this is a great design, as well as I really love the development of this duper. And this is the design as well. It will be in the description. I think that this is a really good idea, and it's just satisfying to watch. I would consider this a cheap cobble farm. I mean, obviously the obsidian isn't that great, but this probably wouldn't be a starter cobble farm. But it is a little bit faster than most of the average cobble farms that are out there that aren't very expensive. This might be about 8 stacks of obsidian, and I don't think that's impossible for the average player to gather, but you could probably use less obsidian over here, and you probably don't even need the solid wall here, and as well as over here, so you probably only need like 3 or 4 stacks of obsidian max. You just need enough obsidian to cover really all the soft parts right here, and you don't need to worry about the TNT destroying anything back behind here because it's out of range. But I actually have this row right here to prevent items from landing on top of the generation column. I don't know why that was happening, but the random motion could sometimes pop the blocks up and over, and they would land here, and I didn't like that. So I wanted to avoid that, so that's what that row there is for. You don't really need anything past that, but I wanted to protect as much of this farm as possible. And then, again, you could probably remove some of this if you wanted to and design it a little differently if you wanted to be able to see everything. But I still think the flowing lava from the side, as well as all the moving parts, made this a really great concept for a farm. And I hope to develop it further at some point. I hope you guys like this design, and I hope the wackiness of it is still pretty unique as well. I really still love the design of this farm, even though it's probably pretty inefficient. I will leave every schematic to all of this in the description so you guys can play with any of these that you want, maybe optimize them or get them to work, or even make something as mega as this work. That would be a lot of cobble. I have no idea what that would even make. But yeah, another random farm.